everyone, this is Miss Rogers. In your statistics class, you've probably already learned how to read, interpret, and create graphs. But did you know that even when a graph presents accurate data, it may still be misleading? Every day, graphs are created for news programs, company ads, and political campaigns that aim to warp a viewer's perception of data to favor the creator's interests, whether intentional or not. In this lesson, we'll discuss 3 big examples of ways everyday graphs can be created to mislead, so you can identify and avoid believing or accidentally using these dishonest strategies. As a disclaimer, all the blue example graphs you're going to see were created by me with fake datasets purely for educational purposes. Here's our first example of a misleading graph. I'll let you know the name of this data manipulation tactic in the next slide. For now, just take a look and see if you can notice anything off about how I've presented this data. We can see that this graph presents the scores of 4 students on a recent test. If I was honestly showing this graph to you as a real dataset, and your name was Kevin, you'd probably be feeling a little worried right now. At a cursory glance, it looks like Kevin did very poorly on his test. A closer look at the graph, however, reveals that I've done something called truncating the y-axis to make Kevin's score seem much lower than it actually is. If you look to the bottom left, where those arrows are pointing, you'll realize that I started the percentage axis with 80 instead of 0. This sneaky technique allows me to present data that makes it seem like Kevin is doing terribly, when in reality, he achieved not only a passing grade on his test, but a B. In real-life situations, we might consider why I, the graph creator, have an interest in making Kevin look bad. Has he slighted me, or do I just really want to make Mary look good in comparison? To avoid being fooled by this tactic, make sure to check that the axes of bar and line graphs have a reasonable starting number. In most cases, that number will be 0. Our second example of a misleading graph comes in the form of a horizontal bar graph. Here, we're looking at mean results from a restaurant quality assurance survey, and our first impression is probably positive. Every category presented is rated very highly. After seeing this data, you might be encouraged to eat here for dinner. However, when we flip to the next slide, you'll notice I included something missing from the previous graph, a data point concerning the quality of the restaurant's food. In the first example, I used cherry picking to give you a false view of the restaurant's quality. I only used data from my fictional survey that represented the restaurant positively, leaving out the more negative data. To avoid being fooled by this tactic, it's important to pay close attention to the context of the graph. Realistically, a restaurant should be most concerned with the quality of their food. If they aren't presenting data about this topic, it's important to ask yourself why that might be. Lastly, I've presented for you a 3D pie chart showing what percentage of these 5 students' classmates voted for them as class president. You can probably tell I'm up to something here, as I've blocked out the percentage totals for each name. But just looking at the visual of the graph, I want you to consider who you think won the race. What piece of the pie looks the biggest to you? If you answered Samantha, you'd be correct. If not, don't worry. It's because I purposefully tried to trick you by using my 3-dimensional pie chart, in which Gregory's slice, because it's presented closest to us, visually reads as the biggest. I've added a 2D pie chart here on the right for comparison. You'll notice how much easier in this 2D format it is to tell who won, who came in second, and who came in third. Generally speaking, it's best to be suspicious of anyone employing a 3D chart, and to avoid doing it yourself. Chances are, they're using a visual trick to skew your perception of the data being presented. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about hypothetical real-world scenarios for these misleading graphs, but here I wanted to show you some real ones. These ads on the left are engaging in some of the tactics we just talked about in the presented graphs. Please examine them closely and consider the accompanying questions on your handout.